All right, we got some breaking news. World War III hybrid warfare is in full swing today. Israel had a complete shutdown of emergency services phone lines. Today, people could not access fire department, could not access the police, could not access the ambulance. This is a major cyber attack simply because this could lead to total anarchic chaos, as you could appreciate. You want to see the purge, get rid of people's ability to access emergency services. Now, fortunately, these services have been brought back online. But if it could happen in a place like Israel, where they have very stringent cybersecurity controls, you can bet your ass that it can happen in your major city in North America or elsewhere. We need to prepare for this type of hybrid warfare. It happened over the weekend in the United States, as I'm going to talk about today. It possibly happened several other times today in numerous different countries that we're going to talk about. But as this war ramps up, this is what we're going to see more and more. Now, something clicked for me today. Okay, it just became, it's like a moment of clarity. Because ever so often, I doubt myself, with respect to my prognostications about the timelines. Oftentimes, I'm far too aggressive and short and impulsive in the sense that I think that things are going to unfold faster than they do. And the thing always comes, it just comes later than I expect it. Okay, like the Kakhovka Dam situation. Many people have forgotten about that already. It happened earlier this year in Russia when they blew the dam. Someone who blew the dam. We were talking about that last year. Everything, it's like we're a year early. But I think it finally clicked for me exactly what is going on. Now, to put in perspective, okay, I need you to sit down. Well, I rattle off this short list of things. And I say short, this took me about 20 minutes to write. This is all stuff out of my head. Things that have happened in the last few months that are pointing us towards a clash of civilizations, an inevitable clash of civilizations in this multipolar world. Many of you know my thesis is there cannot be a multipolar world. That's called a Cold War, especially when you have several superpowers, nuclear superpowers. Now, what compelled me to want to do this and share this with you is this news that came out recently that Russia was going to be relocating its S-400 missile defense systems away from Kaliningrad. Now, why would you do that? Russia wants warm water ports. That's why they want access to the Black Sea. That's why they want to dominate the Black Sea. They need a warm water port, especially in the Baltic Sea. Kaliningrad is that very thing. Now, I just heard an hour ago, NATO announced that they're going to be doing exercises simulating a blockade of entrance into the Black Sea from St. Petersburg. Guys, everything is lining up, okay? And you're going to see my map here. It looks like Axis and Allies, because that's exactly what it is. Everything is taking shape. But just sit down for a sec and let me rattle off this stuff, and we'll go into greater depth in just a moment. In the last few months, the following has happened. And before I forget, Germany just moved their Patriot missile defense systems from Poland, which they are now engaged in some kind of weird blockade thingamajigger going on. Or the Germans have, what have they done? They're customs checking every Polish truck in response to the Poles blockading the Ukrainian border. So we're seeing a rift there. Anyways, so Germany relocating its missile defense, its Patriot missile defense, of course, at the advice of the United States. Big Daddy United States said, okay, you got to send those Patriots to Ukraine now. Ukraine needs them. Get a load of this. Are you sitting down? Okay. Poland arming up to become Europe's largest military. They've been unloading military equipment in Poland by the boatloads for several months, and they have plans to become NATO's largest single country military. They've also been mobilizing towards the border with Belarus and the Suwalki corridor. Russia pulling back S-400s from Kaliningrad. Why are they doing that? Well, maybe I should just tell you now before we go into the list. Stay sitting down. They're doing that, I think, because they're willing to forego Kaliningrad. I do believe that if the shit hit the fan, it's kind of like your body. When your body is in survival mode, what it wants to preserve most is the vitals. It will starve your extremities of the ability to function if it means taking those resources and protecting the heart and the lungs and all of your vital organs. If Russia knew that nuclear war was on the immediate horizon, they would likely pull back a lot of their very sensitive major equipment from Kaliningrad and just say, screw it. Because so long as they can launch from here, especially if you're talking about a retaliatory strike, or a preemptive strike, I should say. In a preemptive strike, or would it be, how would you factor this? So what I'm trying to say is they would pull the S-400 back to preserve, not only to protect the motherland, because these S-400 systems, I believe the high-end estimate was that they had about 96. Now, not all of those are going to be operational. Several have been destroyed in Ukraine. They've probably been manufacturing some, but they would want to consolidate those units. And you would think that if they planned on doing a preemptive strike, why would you need them there in the first place? A preemptive strike meaning they would launch first, right? So why would they need S-400 in Kaliningrad? Perhaps they suspect that NATO is about to try some shit in Kaliningrad, and they're willing to just let it go for now. Just kind of like how they let Kherson go, how they backed away from Kiev at the beginning of the war. The Russians do some weird maneuvers that don't make sense to people at first. But, something like this, when it would take a lot to protect this. I mean, you got Lithuania, it's surrounded basically by NATO. So anyways, just keep that in mind. I think that they could be pulling it back because they see the risk of going to war with NATO as very high right now. Now, probing operations into Moscow. The major drone attack that we seen last night, 20 drones. I think it's a probing operation to try to test and suss out the Russian missile defense, so that when a big war between NATO and Russia does start, they're going to know where the weak points are, okay? F-35s and Typhoons are going to be trained, Typhoon fighter jets are going to be trained to operate on highways next year in the UK. Why would you do that? Because you'd be worried about nuclear war. You spread out all of the warplanes because you don't want them to be dependent on airstrips and airports. One of the first things that's going to be taken out when this shit hits the fan. More nuclear weapons are en route to the UK. F-35 bombers, 50 of them to be exact, armed with the new and improved tactical nuclear weapons that the U.S. military is making, which are not that much different. I guess they're a bit more accurate. Anyway, stealth bombers touching down in Europe for the first time. Development of new tactical nukes in the U.S. Russia deploying YARS closer to the border. YARS, intercontinental ballistic missiles. That might not make sense considering these things are used intercontinentally, so to go into other continents. But really, this is just a deterrence. This is a flex. This is saying, NATO, we see what you're doing and we're putting you on notice. They've also, in the last 2 years, deployed new Sarmat missiles. They're going to be doing a new Sarmat test. The Skyfall prototype, Zircon hypersonic missiles, Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, Poseidon nuclear torpedoes, and an anti-satellite S-500 that they used to kick off this whole war in the first place. 3 major naval vessels in the Baltic strike carrier groups. We have MiG-31s on combat duty armed with Kinzhal missiles in the Black Sea. That just happened a couple months ago. We got Ukraine getting warships, NATO warship escorts in the Black Sea along with Typhoon fighter jets from the UK. Talk about a potential flashpoint for Russia to go to war with NATO. We have Baltics shutting down their borders. Finland today said that there's a very good chance that they're going to shut their final border crossing with the Russians. What the hell is going on? And every single Baltic nation is doing the same thing. Belarus getting nuclear weapons. Syria being at the crossroads of this conflict with Israel and having their airports lit up night after night. Now you have the Russians in the Golan Heights. Acting as some sort of intermediary, trying to prevent the war from escalating further. But now, Maria Zakharova, one of the foreign ministers, has said that if Israel continues to attack Syria, they may actually have to intervene. We have a new stealth bomber that was just unveiled. We have the largest NATO military and nuclear exercises across all domains since 2022. We have, they're about to do that blockade drill in the Gulf of Finland, which is just insanely provocative to me. We have the French doing their nuclear weapons testing. We have Russia, China, and the United States all now committing to doing more nuclear testing. We have a increased consolidation of weapon sharing between Iran and North Korea and Russia. We have the U.S. altering their nuclear doctrine, to allow for a preemptive strike. They did that under the radar last year. Of course, they're going to be doing a $1.5 trillion upgrade of their nuclear program. We have the complete and utter abandonment of all nuclear treaties. There are not only no more nuclear treaties, there isn't even a conventional forces treaty in Europe, meaning that all of the conventional weapons are going back to the borders. I mean, this is just insane. U.S. nuclear submarines on the Korean Peninsula. Just recently, we also, I believe, have a a strike carrier group or two within that region as well. I can't keep all this stuff in my head. We have North Korea now rearming the demilitarized zone, withdrawing from a 2018 agreement that scaled back the armament of that region, and now South Korea is following in suit. We have record amounts of North Korean missile testing. Of course, they just launched a satellite. There's rumors they're going to do another nuclear test. We have record incursions into Taiwanese airspace by the Chinese. We had the balloon incidents. We had NATO increasing its combat readiness force to 300,000. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. Forward deployment of F-35s armed with tactical nuclear weapons. We had that situation in Turkey just a month ago, where all of those protesters were storming that military base that housed the nuclear weapons. Are we going to see Turkey flip the switch at some point? We have the collapse of the Iranian JCPOA talks, claims of Iranian non-compliance in nuclear enrichment. We have South Korea, as I said, rearming the demilitarized zone. Of course, there are 28,000 U.S. troops there, one of the largest troop presences in any country in the world. We have the U.S. increasing plutonium pit mining. This will be used in nuclear weapons. We have a U.S. nuclear submarine presenting itself in the Middle East. We have the Houthis threatening Israeli nuclear sites, Israeli politicians threatening the Samson option, of course, the whole commandeering of commercial vessels and blah, blah, blah. We have emergency alert drills in every country on an unprecedented scale, nuclear war drills in Russia simulating a Mad Max event, upgrading of nuclear bunkers in Russia, stockpiling of radiation medications, nuclear emergency public awareness campaigns, increased STRATCOM activity, out the yin-yang, increase emergency alert messages across the board. 8 out of 11 carrier strike groups are currently out to sea, and the House just passed Resolution 559 that would give them the license to invade Iran if they thought, as they currently do think, that Iran was not compliant with the International Atomic Energy Agency. We have the shooting down of drones, the blocking of waterways, and then there's that whole Hamas Hezbollah thing. That's just the tip of the iceberg, man. I mean, that's really, I didn't even scratch the surface of the news that we've been providing. So I understand, but when you see exactly what's happening, okay? So now Ukraine was like the sacrificial lamb. Now NATO is saying, and the audacity of these people, they're saying, well, we need some younger people on the front lines because we think these people that we're sending, they're too old and they're not physically fit enough. So Ukraine, you're going to have to send more of your young people to die. I guarantee you it's only a matter of time before you see a revolt as a result of this. If NATO is not willing to commit its own bodies to this war at some point in time, and that is coming, I do believe. And remember, this has been the threat all along. And they don't just say these things to say them. Zelensky doesn't just say, you know, well, you guys are going to have to fight if we don't. He means it when he says it. And it's not because he's going to have the power to make the call. No, he just understands the big picture. That's the big play. Okay, and this is why they're now scrambling. They probably thought that they could bankrupt the Russians. But of course, they are so short-sighted and they project their own weaknesses onto these countries that have basically become immune to sanctions. And now we're working together. See, when you put sanctions on so many countries, and I went over my views on sanctions yesterday, when you put sanctions on so many countries, they start to work together. So it backfires. So you might be able to sanction one country, okay? And you might be able to sanction another. But then those two countries who are sanctioned come together and say, well, hey, you want to trade? I got this, you got that, okay. And then if that's your blanket approach to dealing with an adversary is you just apply sanctions, then eventually you're going to have a lot of enemies like Belarus, North Korea, half of the North African nations, China, Russia, Yemen, Iran, Lebanon, the list goes on, right? And so as this list grows and grows and grows, these people all start to conduct trade together. That's basically what BRICS is, minus India, which is kind of on the fence, right? So that's what's going on. I mean, the war is coming. It's just, it's the timeline has been, I've been way too short, but I'm obviously long on this. If I had to be a betting person, I would be long on World War III because everything is falling into place. I mean, you'd have to be really blind. All of those things that I just mentioned, that was just 25% of it. Now, could increase that by 4, okay? And what you're going to get, I hear some sound somewhere. Where the hell is that sound coming from? What the hell is that sound? Weird. Maybe it's a CIA. Maybe it was a Bustamante interview. Just kidding. Okay, what was I talking about? Yeah, so I think a lot of people are going to get desensitized by the time it comes. And that's one of the big things that worries me right now is that while all this is shaping up, people have lost interest and they only regain interest when there's a major event. And it almost helps that there are those major events along the way, those flashbulb events that people can kind of latch onto and have a tangible experience of what SHTF is going to be like. Because were it not for that, this stuff could just be building up in the background, and before we know it, shots are fired. Now again, I think these things happen a lot more incrementally than we've been trained to believe by Hollywood, and that's part of the problem. Anyways, I hope that helps put in perspective what we're dealing with here. And I think I ripped up one of my sheets that I was not supposed to rip up, but it was about the exercise. Let me see if I have the notes here. It was about the exercise in Finland. Okay, so we have NATO ships practicing a blockade of the Gulf of Finland as a part of the Freezing Winds exercise. According to the Finnish Navy, about 30 warships, minesweepers, gunboats, and sport vessels, 16 aircraft, and 4,000 troops are taking part in the exercise. They're going to try to block access to the Baltic Sea to the Russians. Do you think that's going to end well? During the exercises, which by the way are held for the first time under the leadership of Finland as a member of the alliance, the scenario of seizure of Russian islands of Gotland, Bolshoi, Tjors, Mighty, and the subsequent blockade of the Gulf of Finland and the Kaliningrad region is being worked out. This is insane. This is going to be incredibly provocative to the Russians. A powerful group of forces, including over 5,000 servicemen, 30 ships, and 20 aircraft, has approached Russia's northwestern borders. At the same time, it's officially announced the scenario does not conceal the offensive nature of the actions. Remember, St. Petersburg is a stone's throw away from NATO's nuclear deployment systems. So the Russians have to be on edge right now. This has to be part of the reason why they're pulling those S-400s back, because the Russians are just going to cut their losses and say, you know what, sorry Kaliningrad, you were useful strategically, we wanted that warm water port. There's a possibility now. Now, I don't think they're just going to roll over. I think they're going to threaten and possibly actually use nuclear weapons to defend Kaliningrad. But this is insane to me, absolutely insane. Now, what you're seeing here is Iran demonstrating. I mean, think if you're Iran. All you have to do right now, what you've been doing, you're like the Gaza Strip, only an entire country of 80 million people, which should have a GDP of around 1 trillion, but they've been crippled by sanctions. And all you have to do is build drones and missiles all day. That's Iran, okay? They have so many drones and missiles, they're exporting them to the Russians, to put in perspective. And it's possible that the Russians and the Iranians worked in tandem on their hypersonic program. Now, this emergency services phone lines restored after cyber attack initially feared. Phone lines for essential services were not operating as of early Tuesday morning, prompting the activation of alternative hotlines. Phone lines of essential services in Israel, such as Megan, David, Adam, police, fire department, were down for over an hour amid a malfunction initially feared to be a cyber attack. The Bezek Electric Company stated that following the company's initiated night work, a malfunction occurred in Bezek lines. The company's engineers are working to restore all services to full operation. Police, Hatzalah, and fire department hotlines are now operational after the initial pause. So it sounds like they're trying to walk it back a little bit there. But as far as I've been told from cybersecurity experts, a hack of this magnitude is not particularly difficult. Attributing it would be difficult, of course, and this has not stopped the Israeli propaganda wing from calling it a cyber attack. So Iran has declared cyber war, according to Israeli War Room. Now, again, these are not government affiliated Twitter pages. At least as far as I know. I'm sure there is some loose affiliation there. There very likely, most likely is. But just something to keep in mind. So if this were to happen here, I believe it would be a lot worse, especially if it was prolonged. I mean, imagine not being able to contact the police. When criminals knew that police could not be contacted, could you imagine the chaos that would ensue in the inner cities of North American cities? It would be absolute chaos, not being able to get an ambulance, having to rely on essentially taking people, to the hospital directly, fire. I mean, you would just be dealing with so much chaos in the failure of emergency services. And that is but one vector for a cyber attack. I would encourage you to go and check out the video we did probably over a year ago now. Actually 2 years ago. This was during the beginning of the pandemic, and it was talking about what the beginning 24 hours of a full-scale global cyber attack would look like, and it looks like the prediction was for December 13th 2023. So I guess we're going to see if that plays out. That date was just an ambiguous date we threw out there, but I would encourage you to go check it out. And the goal of this was just to show all of the various systems that could be compromised by a cyber attack. Everything from waterworks to power grids to nuclear reactors to emergency services, etc., etc. That video is called The First 12 Hours of a Cyber Attack. Now, in the same vein, we also have another cyber attack that happened today. This one, I believe, was at a water treatment facility, Municipal Water Authority of Aliquippa. And this one made the news in Pittsburgh. So I'm not going to play this, but you can go and research it. I think there was I'm not sure what the actual outcome of this was, but they're attributing it to anti-Israeli hackers. So I'm not sure what Israel has to do with this organization, or if this was just an opportunistic hacktivist who wanted to, associate this attack with that particular cause. So anyways, this just goes to show, especially in a water treatment facility, I mean, if you contaminate the water supply. There was another incident where there was actually I think this led to a fire, if I'm not mistaken. But there was another incident today where, what was it? It was a flaring of, I'm not sure if I have that link here, but it was a flaring of a natural gas facility. Chevron Richmond refinery plant, they said there was a power failure at the facility, so they were forced to flare off the excess gas, I guess, which is caused. Now, this is something that happens, but apparently this was a rather excessive flaring display. I've seen it happen before around here at our refinery plant, so I'm not sure how significant of a situation this was, but who knows? At this stage of the game, I'm almost leaning towards cyber attack for most things, because we've seen, Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. We've seen just cyber attacks abound from the banking system, the ATMs not working here in Canada. So that's kind of my go-to default. It's not always going to be that, of course. There are just malfunctions and failures in our collapsing society. That is to be expected as well. But something to think about anyways. Now, in terms of the rest of the news that we got to talk about, Yemen, apparently they're saying that that ship, the other ship that was hijacked, was the Somalis. Now, a lot of the very pro-Israel OSINT crowd are disappointed that it wasn't a spec ops American thing where they went in and they showed the Houthis who was boss. Turns out it was the Somalians, okay? So, or at least that's what the American government is saying. Now, what doesn't really add up is why did the Houthis immediately afterwards fire upon an American ship, allegedly with ballistic missiles? Why you would use ballistic missiles for that anyways? It's like a long shot, and apparently the missiles fell short of the target. So they claim, well, the Houthis are doing this all the time anyway, so it's very hard to make a connection necessarily between those two things unless they are in communication and there is some sort of coordination happening between Somalia and Yemen, but I don't know the nature of relations between those two countries. But here are the 4 incidents that we've seen happen, okay? So we've had a vessel approached, we've had one hijacked and freed, which this is the one that was attributed now to the Somalians. We've had another one that was ordered to alter its course, and we have the Galaxy Leader, which of course was hijacked. And I believe there was another one that was fired upon. That might have been one of the ones that was approached by 2 craft. But again, it's hard to attribute blame if you got the Somalians and the Yemenis right through this tiny little, what do they call it, strait, where, you know, it's not necessarily tiny. Let's see if we can get some perspective on how big that actually is. I mean, it's really the size of, let's see if I can just take a reference point here, the Gaza Strip. I actually have a measurement tool, so let's measure it. Let's take a little break from talking here, and let's measure it using the line tool. All right, so, and of course, the depth of this is going to dictate where the ships can travel through. So this is 20 kilometers. So that's a lot. Okay, that's a lot. That's big. You know, that's a big strait. But there's only going to be a part of that strait that is at the adequate depth, I presume, that a large ship can go through. So the places that they go through are going to be rather narrow, most likely. So 20 kilometers, so that's bigger than I expected. But, you know, again, that's not a long range when you're talking about potentially targeting whatever comes through here with missiles. I mean, it's just a stone's throw away as far as the Houthis' firepower is concerned. We have the Chechens now saying that they are going to send another 3,000 troops into Ukraine. And when the Chechens go in, things seem to happen. You know, you remember what happened in Mariupol when the Chechens participated and were playing a leading role in things. So this could indicate that they're about to do some major maneuvers. Now, again, I am not as convinced as a lot of the Russophiles that Ukraine is completely out of this fight. And for one main reason, and that is that if these Kinzhal missiles were indefensible, then there would be no Patriot missile defense systems left, and they would not be putting more in there just to be destroyed. So there must be at least some marginal success of shooting these things down, or their capabilities aren't entirely as advertised. Both sides are incurring massive losses. It's almost arguable at this point that the whole Gaza situation is a distraction away from what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, you could almost make that argument because the actual numbers of dead soldiers day after day, in the hundreds, in the thousands, okay, dwarfs anything that we've seen in the entire conflict in the Gaza Strip. Now, it's been a focal point because of the obvious colonial arguments and things of that nature That's why it's a unique situation. But really, you're talking about a strip of land that contains 2 million people, Greater Israel as a whole, maybe 10 million as a whole people, 10 million of the 8 billion world population commanding all of the attention. There may be a case to make that it could be a partial distraction. Now, of course, because it's this massive distraction, it has the probability of bringing in all of those other loosely affiliated groups, like that are associated with the IRGC and Hezbollah and the Syrian and Iraqi rebels and Yemen and all these countries. So that's why I guess it has the ability to snowball into something much greater in the region, but something to be mindful of, okay? In China, they're just preparing for war, man. I mean, the Chinese are building ships like you would not believe. They are amassing an arsenal that is going to surprise a lot of people, I do believe, because, you know, when you look at it, let's just see what the Chinese are doing, okay? This is Chinese people going home from work from the shipbuilding yard, okay, on their bicycles. Would you ever see anything like this in America nowadays? Never. Never. I mean, this is why, you know, with our work ethic and just wanting to be influencers who drop ship stuff, this never, you know, we're done. We're finished. You know, we might as well just pack it in at this point in time. We should hope that we see some real adversity, some real austerity in our society that will force us back into manufacturing jobs, that will force us to appreciate things once again, so we have to suffer a little bit and rebuild from the ground up. I think that's the only thing that is going to really wake up the American industrial machine, unless we get some sort of AI automation. But I wouldn't count on that just yet, because of course to build all those robots and all those systems takes a lot of time. So anyways, we have this major, these types of things have been happening in Russia in the last week. A massive explosion at a tractor manufacturing facility that, of course, the Ukrainians are saying was, and like, look at the flashes in the sky. I don't know if this is just the camera, the settings on the camera that are getting this, but it almost looks like electrical flashes. But this was a massive explosion at a tractor factory, they're saying. And we've had additional explosions at transformers. Like, look at that. That's insane. That fireball must have been some sort of fuel storage or something, but they must be getting used to this in Russia. Just massive explosions day after day. China's oil reserves are close to reaching storage capacity. Well, they have to be, because like I explained yesterday, they don't have the oil in the ground that the U.S. does. And everybody who's saying drill, baby, drill, they should be grateful that somebody in the U.S. government has the foresight to keep that shit in the ground and save it for a rainy day, because we will need it at some point in time. Yes, I know that the oil refineries here are made to process the type of crude that comes from the Middle East, and they would have to be restructured, remodified in order to process the type of crude that we produce here. But it could be done. It's a lot easier to do that than to get blood from a stone. At least we have the oil in the first place. North Korea is moving heavy weapons to the border with the South, and it's only a matter of time before that situation pops off. It's a lot of this is really going to, like, all of these things are going to coalesce right around the time that the election happens, which is insane. Okay, like, we're going to get so close to war on so many fronts right when the election is about to happen. It's almost like you could not write a fictional story which would be as enticing and entertaining as what we're witnessing unfold right now. Like, everything is just lining up perfectly. By the time the election happens, and here I go again being aggressive in my timelines, you're going to see shots fired over the North Korean border. I do believe. If the Americans want it, especially. Now, the issue at the Iranian power plant, Iran has a lot of nuclear facilities, guys, and I think that we should all just have an awareness of where these various facilities are. So we have a pressurized water reactor here in the south on the coast. We have research reactors. This is where that emergency took place the other day where some people were saying there was an attack. The Iranian military, who would probably not admit if there was, especially if it was a successful one. I think they would admit it if they shot something down, because that's just, makes you look good. So that's where there was a gunfire heard, anti-aircraft fire, as well as explosions. They said it was just a drill. Why you would be doing that around a nuclear facility, I don't know. It seems kind of dangerous. I understand why you would want to train your systems, but these systems should work anywhere. Iran has, as far as I know, very good integrated air defense. So it's not like Russia where things are kind of scattered around and it's a big giant country. If something crosses over here, the whole system recognizes it and it goes for it, okay? So their air defense now apparently is supposed to be pretty good. Mind you, it wasn't too long ago that Israel was able to get planes in there and take things out. So I guess time will tell. We have enrichment facilities, heavy water reactors, places where their yellow cake is mined, nuclear waste disposal. They have uranium reserves. So, they're a very self-sufficient nation. We have Belarus receiving Chinese-made ballistic missiles. I'm not sure if I reported on this already, but this is just, again, the consolidation of the Axis nations working together, all these sanctioned nations working together. Now, China is not heavily sanctioned, but they are somewhat alienated by the international community. Once again, and this is funny because, of course, this story comes out on a day when Elon Musk is visiting Israel. But Russia is saying that they, once again, and they've said this before, that space law, and it's not them saying this, but this is actually an article in the Telegraph, that indicates that in line with the Geneva Convention, they are authorized to shoot down civilian satellites. Typically, you can't shoot civilian anything, okay, in line with the Geneva Convention. But space is a different story. Now, will they do this? Unless they can think of some means of electronic warfare or like laser weapons, which I don't think they have at this point in time, the ability to do this persistently on a massive scale would be challenging, to say the least, because the cost of the missile to get up there, like the one that they shot down their own satellite with, is just way too expensive. Because there's thousands of Starlink satellites. You can't shoot them all down. You go broke. So they have to think of another way to bring down these satellites. And in addition to that, it could backfire. We could see a Kessler syndrome type effect where, you've seen the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock. That's what will happen. It'll just create this cascade of space junk which traps us on the planet. And I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we need to sort out our shit down here before we take it elsewhere. I talked about this stuff going on, this rift between Germany and Poland. This is history repeating, isn't it? This is really history repeating when you think about it. But the United States is obviously trying to be a mediating factor here. I mean, you think about Nord Stream, you can't really say that. But what's happening is Poland doesn't want Ukrainian goods, particularly grain, because it brings down the cost, it brings down the price of their own domestically produced stuff. I think that's what's happening. And so the truckers there are making a blockade on the border between Ukraine and Poland. Now, if that blockade is in place, that means that Ukraine also can't get weapons through that border. And that's primarily been where they're getting weapons from. I think they're probably also getting them through Romania, but those ports there were heavily targeted by the Russians as well. There's probably some other borders that they're getting stuff from. Let's just see here. Let's look at the map. So we got, I got my line tool out. Okay, didn't plan on doing this. But yeah, so they share a border with Romania. They share a border with Moldova. They probably wouldn't get anything from Moldova. There's still this issue of Transnistria. And it looks like they share, they share a much larger border up here with Romania and Hungary and Slovakia and Poland. But primarily, I believe a lot of this stuff came in through Poland, in through Lviv. So if that's shut down, then Germany, who appears to have a vested interest in keeping Ukraine going because that's what the Americans are telling them to do at Ramstein Air Base, is trying to force Poland's hand here by blockading or doing these excessive checks on their trucks as a form of national protest by the government, I guess, to try to force Poland to, fix this border situation and start allowing Ukrainian goods in. Lavrov has basically said, look, we don't trust, NATO anymore. And it's not about when NATO says it's over, it's about when we say it's over, because they realize now that all they're going to try to do is buy time. I mean, how could anybody trust a word we say at this point? And if you do, if the Russians trust us, they're stupid. If the Chinese trust us, they're stupid. And I don't believe they do, but they're going to play the game. They're going to play the game, and they're going to lead us on maybe into making us think that they actually believe us, when in the background they're developing all these systems, which is basically what Russia's been doing. Russia's not stupid, okay? I actually don't like this account. He's kind of says some dumb things once in a while, but Russia's not stupid. So they've been preparing all of their strategic nuclear weapons while doing this Minsk agreement stuff, because I think they knew what NATO was up to. Obviously, how could you not when NATO is constantly expanding, knowing the history of the enmity between the Soviet Union and the United States? Anyways, on a positive note, for those of you who have gold, it's hit a 6-month high. And interestingly about this 6 months high is that there's not a lot of direct news that should be affecting it. Like there hasn't been really a trigger for this increase in the price of gold as of recent, except maybe you could argue that the lowering of rates, the slight lowering of rates, and the fact that the markets are going up as well. So maybe the inflation is just finally starting to catch up, and things are starting to line up and level off. So maybe this is the new plateau for gold, 2000. Really doesn't matter anyways. A thing of gold is going to buy you exactly what it did 2,000 years ago, or the equivalent in terms of value. You can buy a toga, pair of sandals, and a belt in the Roman era, and you can buy yourself the nicest, fanciest suit. Well, maybe not the nicest nowadays. Haven't bought a suit. I don't wear suits. But for 2,000 bucks, I'm sure you could get something pretty decent. So, don't worry about the price of it. I got to do another video on Bitcoin, because the more I think about Bitcoin, man, it's just red flag after red flag. And this is where we get into the rambling part of the video. So if you're still here, congratulations. Bitcoin, the coin that they say there's only 21 million of them. How many million have already been lost in the ether, in garbage dumps around the world, people who lost their codes? They'll never be returned again. And you got all of these snake oil salesmen. And don't get me wrong, I understand cryptocurrency, I understand decentralized finance. I get it. I've had these debates on the channel many, many times before. I get it through and through, for the most part, okay? I get it in theory. When you pair it maybe with something like gold, and you have something that's gold backed, then maybe that is the golden ticket. But my problem with Bitcoin has always been, you got these guys who are sitting on this Bitcoin, and they keep saying, well, if there's only 21 million, my argument has always been and will always be that it's infinitely divisible. So eventually they're just going to call 0.00001 Bitcoin a nano coin or something, and people will start thinking in terms of nano coins. So it's all relative, and you can do that to as many decimal places as you like. So there really is kind of an there's a finite, infinite amount of it. But the problem is that the initial hodlers who have the majority of the Bitcoin thus far, if they never give any of it up, then what does that mean for the 95% of people who don't have any Bitcoin? Well, that means that they're going to be poor, right? And so you're going to have these 5% of the population who, you know, good on them for getting in early. And I dabbled in Bitcoin. I've gambled a little bit over the years, made some money, lost some money, but I got out before the big crash, I should say, back in, what was it, 2021? But yeah, it's a scam. I do believe it's a scam. Number one, we don't know who started it. That's the biggest red flag of all. You know, the Hiroshi, I always mess up his name. It'll come to me at the end of this video. And I don't want to make something up and disrespect my Japanese audience. So I just won't go there. But we don't know where it came from. The people who are hodling it right now are the ones who only stand to benefit when more people start dumping money into the system. It's only worth more if somebody buys it for you for a higher price. And it's not a hedge. It's not going to be, in my personal opinion, I mean, and this is where we're going to get into all realms of disagreement, and this is why I brought this in at the very tail end of the video. I believe in cryptocurrency as in theory, but I don't believe Bitcoin is it. I think you need, if you're going to start something like that, it's not fair to the majority of people, and I know life ain't fair, but it's not fair to, what are you going to do with all the people who have no Bitcoin? If you're trying to base a society around Bitcoin and nobody owns it except the initial 10 million people who bought in and they're going to be kings of the world, you think people are seriously going to go for that? It's not going to happen. So what you do need some sort of conversion of wealth and value that people have in the bank right now, a one-to-one conversion into some new type of Bitcoin, which is decentralized and government and Fed-proof. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below. Congrats on everybody who capitalized on the Black Friday sale. A lot of people took advantage of that, and I tell you, man, like, you know, especially the food, the food prices are only going to go up from here on in. With the drought, the increase in energy prices that are to be expected in the future, especially if the economy starts doing well again, then people are going to just start buying more shit. And this is what the Fed doesn't want, because they know that demand is it's not going to be able to be met by supply, and it's going to drive prices up even higher. So they're almost hoping for people to be poor for a while so they can see a little bit of deflation. But it's not going to happen because we're looking at record drought next year. They're already seeing record drought throughout the rainforest, record drought here in parts of Canada and the grain belt in the southern United States. So the price of basic core commodities is going to end. We're arguably at peak gold at this point in time. Countries are hoarding it. Oil, as much as there is left in the world, we've picked all the low-hanging fruit. And I do believe that we're going to see a commodity super cycle at some point. But this is not financial advice, okay? I got to say, I should have said that first. So anyways, let me know what you think about this, guys. This cyber attack business is pretty crazy. Recall that some people speculated that at the beginning of October 7th, there was a cyber attack that might have triggered compromised the security systems, the sensors, the communication systems. There was attacks they're attributing it to the Iranian government, but you can never be too sure with these things. Attacks on Israeli government websites. So this is the world we're living in, and we have a video that we're working on that I hope gets a little bit more attention beyond our core audience, because it's very important, and we're presenting it in a way that I think is easy to relate and easy to understand. But it's all about hybrid warfare and the many different facets of asymmetrical warfare. And this is going to be what's happening in the run-up. World War III only ends in a mushroom cloud. It starts in ways which are far less sensational. It's starting right now. So keep getting prepared, and just stay fit. That's one of the most important things. People are asking me to do a video on fitness because I've been cutting up lately. I'm down to about 193 pounds. We got videos on fitness coming as well as a Darwinian approach to survival, looking at what are the best body types, what are the best physical characteristics And how might your genetics actually affect your survivability in different environments around the world? Anyways, we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming up, so stay tuned, my friends. Keep on prepping. Canadian Prepper out.